In life, there are certain fundamental decisions that set you off in one direction or another with unpredictable future consequences. When those eventualities manifest, it's often even difficult to see that they are just the delayed but inevitable consequences of those initial big decisions. You usually hit the target you legitimately aim at if it's realistic and you made the required sacrifices to actually earn it. Are you sad because your life consists of beer, pizza, solitude, and video games instead of CEOing, fitness, friends, and financial freedom? You were probably actually aimed at the beer, pizza, and video games the whole time. You've made fundamental decisions, either consciously or subconsciously, that sent you in that direction. Blockchains are no different. They all either chose scientific rigor and security or speed to market and money now. We're currently seeing all that play out in real time. Ready? Let's go. Today, we are going to discuss the giant gulf between Cardano and some of its competitors when it comes to their approach to mitigating exploit risk, a very interesting point regarding speed and security, a Bitcoin celebrity maximalist whose bet is already incurring some consequences, and some discussion about the possibility of Algo-Cardano collaboration. If you look at this beautiful pine-ensconced nature trail and the first thought in your mind is that you'd much rather be in the club on your 5th Long Island, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. We are now on the tail end of 2 days of intense exploits of the Nomad Bridge and also in Solana. Here you can see one of the later reports out of CoinDesk was an exploit impacting Solana's Phantom wallet appears to have drained over 2 million worth of tokens over the past hour. They're saying just over the course of the past hour when this report was made. That's how big this exploit was and how fast it was working. But I think the interesting thing here is not that the robbery forest exists. We've known this for a long, long time. Not that is the forest where if you were the prince of the kingdom, you go to get all of your jewels stolen. We already knew what the robbery forest was. We already knew it existed. The interesting thing here is that it's turning out there are vastly different approaches to mitigating this. It seems like blockchains, just like the human tendencies we talked about in the intro, blockchains are the same as humans. You sort of end up hitting something pretty close to the target that you're actually aiming at. For blockchains, this is as true as it is for humans. If you set out to be first to market because you know that's the way to make the most money now, you're probably going to hit that target. If you set out to create the most secure blockchain, no matter how long it took you to build it, no matter having to adopt functional programming languages that might have slowed developer adoption, if you made those sacrifices that you deemed necessary to build a secure blockchain that is going to promote lack of exploits instead of promoting exploits, if instead of growing a robbery forest for all the thieves to hide in, you chop down all those trees so that there could be no robbery forest, if you stamped out all the seeds that would grow into a robbery forest, instead of using a language like Solidity, you used a language like Haskell to create something like Plutus, a functional programming language, something that would be more secure than Solidity. If you did that and you thought about things like Charles points out here, smart contract standards, even with the smart contracts that are deployed on a permissionless chain, there's an approach you can take to promote lack of exploits. And this is something we don't see in some of these ecosystems that are suffering these exploits right now. There's no set of smart contract standards that I know of that are widespread in these ecosystems where someone's coming along and saying, hey, this is a permissionless ecosystem. You can launch whatever you want. Whatever you want to deploy, go ahead and deploy whatever smart contract. However, we are creating a nonprofit institution, say at a university like the University of Wyoming. Wyoming has been at the forefront of blockchain adoption among states. Why not there? You create a nonprofit institute at one of these academic institutions, and you have that nonprofit entity, academic entity, whatever it is, you have it look at all these smart contracts and sort of rank them. Maybe you have certifications offered by this standards institution, and you can say, hey, you can still deploy whatever you want on our blockchain, totally permissionless. But if you want this to be sort of an accredited smart contract, if you want it to show up in the part of the wallets in our ecosystem that show smart contracts that have been audited by this third-party institution that just looks at smart contract security, then you can do that too. This goes beyond simple third-party audits of smart contracts. We already have third-party audits of smart contracts in the EVM world, and it doesn't always work. It's kind of a process at looking at a bunch of known things and trying to guess what kind of exploits an attacker might come up with. But as you'd expect, sometimes the attackers come up with exploits that the auditor never would have thought of. That's the beauty of different human intellects being applied to the same problem. The more people you have looking at the problem, the more likely you are to come up with novel and new ways to address the problem. Unfortunately, the third-party auditors, it's like a limited number of humans, and the number of attackers over T time period, if T is long enough, is often going to exceed the number of third-party auditors who looked at that contract. So the chances of, that greater pool of attackers over a time period, which might be years, if a third-party audit happens over the course of a couple months, and then all the attackers in the world have, 3, 4, 5 years to try to attack that smart contract, over the course of those years, there might be way more attackers, way more aggressive intellects trying to figure out a way to compromise that smart contract than there were auditors in the first place. So we have to have something beyond just third-party audits. We have to have things like formal verification. We have to have, this kind of standards institution I've been describing and that Charles has described many times. We have to have that kind of institution talking about whether or not the smart contracts are programmed in a language that's even capable of formal verification. Is it written in a language which historically has been more ridden with exploits like Solidity? Is it written in a better language? There are many, many things about these smart contracts we can rank and give the users a much better idea of the danger. What is the genre of the smart contract? Is it a bridge? Because bridges haven't proven themselves to be rock solid in the crypto landscape so far. Bridges have proven themselves to be the sketchiest part of the robbery forest, but a lot of people don't know that. If you just jump into the crypto space right now, you might find out there's a bridge protocol and be like, okay, sounds good, not knowing we have this history of exploits with bridges. There are a lot of things. An institution like this could communicate to the world about all these different types of smart contracts. There's a set of standards you could come up with to embody the best practices across our industry, and then certify or not certify these projects based on whether or not they meet those best practices. But that's not an approach which was part of the fundamental decisions, the founding principles of a lot of these blockchains, because they made that initial fundamental choice to try to get to market first, get the adoption first, make all the money now, make the money first, then go back and worry about security later. I thought this post was a good visual description of what I've just described. So this poster says, Solana roadmap, looking good right now. And then he posted this. I won't play the actual video for you for obvious reasons, but you can see what he thinks of the Solana roadmap based on these stills. Likewise, Southry in this post points out something that we may have been wrongly criticizing Solana about. A lot of people in the Cardano community have raised an eyebrow at the various measurements the Solana ecosystem, people in the ecosystem have put forward about Solana's TPS. We've criticized the way they were counting that TPS, but Southry offers here Sol really does have the highest TPS in the world, the highest thefts per second. The interesting thing, though, I think about this sort of fundamental decisions analysis of blockchains is that when you're a Solana and you've made these decisions about how to get to market fastest, and maybe you've made some compromises in terms of things like decentralization, maybe security, you can't really go back and change course and suddenly say, hey, I know you guys have gotten used to these certain scalability advantages, but actually we're going to totally change course now. We're going to go for high decentralization and high security. We're going to go back and rebuild. You can't really do that because the blockchain's already out there. Everything's deployed. Sure, you could shift direction a little bit, but it's really hard to go back and start over and change those fundamental decisions. The same can be said of Ethereum with decisions around global state and things like slashing. It'd be really tough for them to go back now and say, hey, I know we were about to launch Ethereum 2.0, but we just figured out that this whole slashing thing, if we enforce the right behaviors in our staking ecosystem by taking away the coins of stake pools and delegators, we're just gonna change that now and go with something else. It would be nearly impossible for them to change that up now. Even seeing what that has wrought in terms of the rise of something like a Lido, which has taken up this gigantic portion of the delegation in the Ethereum proof of stake system and produced this staking derivative instrument that introduces all this new risk about that staking derivative instrument, actually correlating, over, any longer time period with the actual value of the Ethereum the actual Ether it's supposed to represent. They can't go back now and say, oh, we don't like the way this is going. We're going to go back and completely rebuild a non-slashing version of Ethereum 2.0. It doesn't really work like that because these are fundamental decisions that set them off in a certain direction. It'd be very hard to double back now and rebuild everything with different assumptions about slashing and global state in the case of Ethereum, or about what compromise they want to make with the blockchain trilemma in terms of Solana. In Cardano sort of made the hard sacrifices up front. The sacrifices were front loaded. They made a lot of sacrifices to ensure a higher level of security, to ensure that we have liquid staking, to ensure that we didn't have to suffer the negativity and loss of slashing. Speaking of fundamental decisions, it turns out when you are a celebrity Bitcoin maximalist like Michael Saylor, and you decide to have your company buy insane amounts of Bitcoin and hold that Bitcoin on the balance sheet, sometimes that turns out to be inconsistent with you continuing on as CEO of the company. Here, this poster says, Microsystems posts massive loss of $94.01 per share, or 1.06 billion. We'll read a report in a second that has some different numbers on that, but kind of equally crazy magnitude. At Michael Saylor, to step down as CEO. Company will split CEO and executive chairman role, which Saylor will assume. Perhaps leveraging into Bitcoin wasn't the best strategy. Of course, Michael Saylor, for his part, just characterizes this as the outperformance of MicroStrategies versus other stocks and asset classes, and my decision to take on the executive chairman role at MicroStrategy. He also talks about his intention to focus more on Bitcoin in his next job. Yahoo Finance has a very different spin on this. They say Michael Saylor steps down as MicroStrategy CEO. Company takes $917 million charge on Bitcoin. MicroStrategy reported quarterly results that were light of Wall Street estimates on Tuesday, with revenue coming in at 122.1 million against expectations for 126 million. But here comes the big part. Losses in the quarter totaled 918.1 million, with 917.8, almost the entire amount, 917.8 million attributable to the company's Bitcoin holdings. MicroStrategy announced on Tuesday its founder and CEO, Michael Saylor, will step down from the top job and take a new post as executive chairman focused on the company's Bitcoin strategy. In a statement, MicroStrategy said Saylor will focus primarily on innovation and long-term corporate strategy while continuing to provide oversight of the company's Bitcoin acquisition strategy. What do you want to bet that this was not really a decision that was, let's put it politely, not entirely in Saylor's own hands? To me, this is kind of like him coming out and saying, hey, it's not that I quit going to the gym, it's that I've made a decision to have a less narrow physique. Finally, as many speculated when it was first announced that John Woods was moving from Cardano over to Algorand, we're already seeing the seeds of possible collaboration between these two blockchains. Here, Stick with Pride says, John Woods shares thoughts about collaboration between Algorand and Cardano with state proofs for safer bridges as an example. And he posts this clip where John Woods is talking about a more trustless way to create I almost hesitate to even use the word bridge now, but what we would currently think of as a bridge between blockchains, and how Cardano and Algorand, as what he describes as sort of the two big brain blockchains, being the perfect candidates to sort of combine their credibility and go after this type of trustless bridge between blockchains. I hope you're having a great week, and I will talk to you tomorrow.